crazy thing with the exercising also is it gives me a lot of energy. Like when I'm working out all the time, I've accredited a lot of the time for giving me the energy to want to do a ska-punk band right now from all the working out. But I feel like also being cooped up in the house all day, if I maintain that level of energy, it makes me like not fun to be around, because then I'm like bouncing off the walls.
All right, Adam Davis, thank you so much for coming to the Question the Answers podcast. How are you doing today, sir?
Great. How you doing, Andy?
I'm doing pretty well. I mean, under the circumstances, hanging in there. Yeah, man, I wanted to bring you on here and just kind of talk about some of the, projects you've got going on. You've always kind of had your hand in the music scene. I know you took some time away when you were starting your family, but you recently jumped that right back into it with Omnigone. And you had been doing GNARBOOTS prior to that. Prior to that, you had been in the bands DESA and DESA and Flat Planet. And if there's any others that I may have not, you had a brief stint with Lucky Strike.
Yep. So,
I mean, you kind of had your hand in all sorts of different cookie jars, as well as being, a very talented artist and graphic designer, a doorman / security guard at a couple of different venues along the way. So, I just kind of wanted to really talk about some of the things that you've been working on the last few years, and I don't know, just pick your brain a bit. So I don't know, give me an idea of like what Omnigone is and like how that all came about.
Sure. Okay, so here we go. Here's the new record on Bad Time Records.
Bad Time Records.
Put that out September of this year, and then we followed that up with a little 7-inch here with a band called Catbite from Philadelphia. Basically, the way the split ended up coming up was kind of interesting, because I had initially just covered one of their songs because I think they're an amazing band and they write really great songs, and I just wanted to surprise them with it as something like I was just going to release it online, and then they could find it and be like, oh my gosh, like that's so cool. But instead, Mike from Bad Time kind of I guess he was talking to Tim from Catbite and spilled the beans prematurely. I guess they were talking about wanting to do something, and Mike was like, well, Adam did this cover, here it is, and showed it to him. And then he's like, oh my gosh. And he's like, maybe you guys could do a split where you cover each other's songs. And so Tim was like, yeah, that'd be rad. So they ended up doing that, and it was really cool. So that's what I've been doing as far as music lately. And that's been kind of the big push lately is doing Omnigone. It's something that I mean, you and I both came up playing in ska-punk bands,
right?
And I've tried some other stuff, and I've found that what I want to do and what I feel like audiences want me to do is to play ska-punk music, and so
totally.
I'm happy to do that like all day long. And I feel like the community around that right now is really strong and really supportive. And there's a lot of other really cool bands happening right now. And I feel really lucky to be a part of it, especially at 43. I didn't think I would still be playing music at this point. So it's really cool to be a part of something that I feel like is so vital and has people from all across age demographics and all across the country, all across the world, all kind of pulling together to create this tight-knit community.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, I had Mike on the podcast before, and we kind of briefly touched on this as well, is that one of the things that I particularly see as an observer, with all the bands that are involved in Bad Time Records. And I know that this happens in other, labels and other groups of bands and genres as well, but it strikes me as being so cool that all of those bands, like you guys, Catbite, Kill Lincoln, Ska Network, We Are the Union, you're all doing such a great job at like elevating each other and really promoting each other as well as yourselves. And one of the things that I've observed, just as somebody who's been in a different styles of bands over the years, is that it's not necessarily only one genre that's prone to this, but sometimes bands get so locked in and only like kind of promoting themselves, and that's fine. I mean, it's not that it's necessarily a bad thing, because that's a full-time job as it is, but I think that there is something to be said about using a little bit of that extra time and leverage to like if you've got a bigger footprint, like maybe a larger audience, it doesn't hurt anyone to just mention, like another band that you really like, particularly a band that you're really fond of, and you can kind of actually be a promoter for. Like, you really love Catbite, and I mean, I love Catbite, and I'm not even affiliated with those guys, but I'll promote them, so.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I really want all the bands that I am excited about. I want to be their friend more than anything.
Right.
I mean, I think, and that comes from the truest place in my heart, where like when I love something, I can't deny it. I can't play too cool about it and like act like I'm not super into it. So the best way I can support a band that I really like is to just tell them how much I love them, and to tell the world how much I love them, because otherwise it's there's such a glut of bands at this point. It's so easy to start a band, it's so easy to put out your own music now, that there's a lot of noise out there, and sometimes it's hard to cut through what's good. It's hard to find what's good. And so if you can be a voice that holds somebody up and says, even if that only puts them in front of one more set of ears, that's at least putting them in front of another set of ears organically, outside of a machine that's pumping this stuff out.
Right. No, and I applaud everything that you guys have collectively done, not only from Omnigone's, channel. And I mean, I follow you guys on like Instagram and Facebook. And I think that for the most part, you are the one leading that effort, for Omnigone. But
yeah, I mean, Omnigone is really just me and Barry.
Right. Right.
But Barry doesn't like social media. Barry doesn't like the internet. And Barry trusts me. He's fine with whatever I want to say. He's perfectly happy to sit back in the cut and just play bass.
Sure.
And he has full trust in me that I'm not going to do something stupid that is going to reflect badly on him. Like, I very much want to put our best foot forward at all times. And I think we definitely, we talk a lot. We text each other pretty often. And I feel like we land in the same places, like, politically and relationship wise with people, and just how we feel about the world. So I really feel like, it's easy for me as the front person for the band, to be able to be the one having the voice. It was harder, like in bands like Link 80 or DESA. A lot of the time I was still trying to be the voice because there was nobody else who wanted to be the voice. Especially in DESA, I was usually the one, writing things on the internet, but it was harder because I felt like I really had to represent everybody. And it was a group of people. It was 5 people, and everybody had very different opinions on things. And so I never felt like I could be as honest as I wanted to be, and I never felt like I could just put things out in my own words. Like, I felt like I really had to try to water it down for not having a better way to say it, just because I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And now that it's just Barry and I, and basically whoever comes along for the ride, we kind of have a little bit more freedom to just be ourselves.
No, and I actually think that's pretty. It's a pretty important thing to think about when you're in a band. That idea that if any one person within a group takes that lead effort, like you said, more often than not, they have to really walk this fine line, where you have to be representative of everyone in the band, but also, maintain, a presence. And so you're constantly having to kind of consider, okay, well, what is the audience going to think, but also what is my band going to think? And I mean, it kind of sounds like for you, this has now become, and I mean, I'm guessing that with GNARBOOTS, because it was you and Aaron, and you guys kind of grew up together and like came up with Flat Planet back in the day, it might have been similar, but it sounds like there's that really great level of trust with you and Barry having been involved in DESA and Link 80, that, it's cool that he's comfortable with you just kind of being that voice. And, it saves you the hassle of having to, weigh everything out, and you can just kind of be your authentic self. And I mean, gosh, that's a lot of freedom that a lot of bands don't get.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with GNARBOOTS, we were kind of more trying to create a world and a vibe with that. So even still, I would try to bounce stuff off of Aaron, but it wasn't like authentically how I feel about the world. A lot of the time I was trying to present GNARBOOTS as a cult and very much give, borrow text from other things. Like I would steal verses from the Bible or from different texts, and I would just replace a word in the verse with GNARBOOTS. And it would completely shift the voice behind it. And that was a fun experiment. It's a fun way to do things, but it's more theatrical. It's not coming from like a this is me every day sort of thing. Like when you get Omnigone, like this is me every day. Like
right.
This is the person I am doing this band is the person I am every day. And so it's 100% me. It's really liberating and weird in a way, just because it's, after doing GNARBOOTS for so many years and kind of trying to figure out what that was. And then even with DESA, where, we never sat down and had that. We tried to sit down and have the conversation of what is this band? What are we trying to do? Because there were so many different elements in the band that were incongruous, where we really should have picked a path for that band. And since we never defined it, it was to our own detriment. We never were trying to be super, super, super out there. Like we always kind of pulled back a little bit from being too crazy. We were trying to be catchy, but not too catchy. Like if we had just picked a path and stuck to it, I think it would have been a little bit easier to define that. And I feel like with something like deciding, okay, it's going to be a ska-punk band with hardcore breakdowns. Like I've done that before. Like right. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here. I'm just trying to like grease the wheel and like make it something that I can be proud of and that I can put out in front of people and feel excited about. That's all I want.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, out of curiosity, I mean, I think a lot of people who have been through this process multiple times before, because perspective and having the ability to kind of separate themselves from the project. But I'm curious, when you guys put the record together, knowing that it was going to be coming out on Bad Time Records, like what in your mind was like, did you think that it was going to be as well received as it has been, or did you just not really care? I mean, and it's just a curiosity out of this point,
So when we went in the studio to record, I didn't know what was going to happen with the recordings. Mm-hmm. The recordings were just an experiment, basically. It was like, I want to get in the studio with a couple different drummers, Barry and myself. I want to just write down chord changes that I've come up with on a piece of paper. We never practiced. There was no practice beforehand. We showed up to the studio. I trust Barry. I trust all the drummers that I saw lined up. I maybe had 3 or 4 kind of just iPhone demos, just recorded in voice memos. And then we just hit it. We just recorded these songs that I wanted to make. And then it was after the fact that Brent, one of the drummers, texted me and said, "What are you going to do with these recordings?" And I was like, I have no idea, dude. Maybe I'll put them out a couple at a time on Bandcamp and hope somebody cares. And he was like, you should put it out on Bad Time. Like, Mike will do it. And I was like, really? You think he'd want to do that? And then it turned out Brent was texting Mike at the same time saying, hey, you should put out this Omnigone record we just recorded. And Mike's saying, really? Would he want to do that? So it was the most uncalculated move I've ever made musically. It was literally just 2 different recording sessions. One was with Reese Noble on drums and Barry. That was the very first one. We just did 3 songs just to see what would happen. It was a blast. So then I found District Recorders in San Jose, where Kill Lincoln just recorded their new record, and found out it's super cheap to record there. It's great. So I just booked a day and we just blasted through songs, and it's the best thing ever to just go into the studio and just knock out the songs. I mean, you and I have both spent hours in practice spaces just grinding it out. DESA used to practice 3 days a week, 3 hours at a time, and it was exhausting. Like, at a certain point, it was diminishing returns, where members of the bands they were more excited to just stay in the practice space and practice than to go play shows. And we got DESA. I've always joked that DESA got really good at breaking down and setting up gear, and that was all we were good at, because I felt like that was all we were ever doing, was just setting up the gear and then breaking it down, rather than, just putting the songs out and then going and playing shows for them, or putting out records. Like, just record the music and release it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching you guys with DESA and feeling like, man, like these guys are busting their ass, and they're trying to like break away from the shadow of Link 80, which was a pretty big shadow to walk away from, because of, you guys having toured so much, and the fact that you had Nick Torena passing away, and he had been like kind of a big notable personality in the scene for the years that he was still around, and a couple of different lineup changes, and just so much of that kind of became like a little bit of and I can only imagine having to deal with that weight as a band trying to start new, and just feeling like, man, like we just can't really necessarily break away from this, and like having to spend so much time in the practice space all the time, slugging away, and just I mean, I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think eventually, after you ended up having your other drummer for like a couple of years, it eventually just kind of fizzled, right? Like it didn't really it wasn't like a proper like, okay, we're done. It was just more like, it just kind of fizzled away, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was weird, because it was just just being young and stupid, and just thinking, oh, we're having success with this one band over here, and we've been grinding it out doing Link 80. We could totally just pivot and shift and call ourselves something else, and people are going to come along for the ride. And that wasn't the case at all. Like, people who were into Link 80 were into Link 80, and they wanted to hear like fast Ska-Punk songs with breakdowns. And so when we started dabbling with all this other weird stuff and calling ourselves something completely different, people didn't really want to come along for that ride. And there were a bunch of little things along the way. Just, it was a lot of hurry up and wait. There were a lot of times when we put out a record, and then the record label that put it out, Substandard, they put out 3 other records at the exact same time as our record. And then all 3 of those bands broke up like immediately. And so he couldn't recover. The label tanked. So then we're stuck with this record that we can't get copies of, that is just and not representative. And then we get hooked up with a producer, and we grind that out for almost 2 years, where he's trying to shape us into this verse, chorus, bridge, chorus type band. And we put out an album with him, and it took us so long and there's so much production on it that live we didn't sound like that. And in that period of time, Joey left the band, and then Steve and Heat joined, and they're both great drummers, but totally different drummers.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we were trying to tour on a record that Joey played drums on with Steven playing drums on it. And I never felt like it gelled. And then eventually the label that put out that record, they were unhappy that we couldn't deliver the goods for the record that we were putting out. And then around that time was the time things like In Rainbows, like the Radiohead album, were coming out, where people were putting out stuff for free online. And it was getting really good reactions. So we're like, well, let's do that. Let's do EPs. So we found a couple different studios and we recorded these EPs. And then we would just kind of put them up on the internet and be like, it's out. And there was no fanfare. There was no physical item. There was no, maybe we play like one show around it. And then, the momentum from that would go away. And it was just diminishing returns. We did that 3 times. And by the last one, no one cared. And I think about 6 months or so before we stopped playing, I think Barry quit. And which I was surprised he stuck in that long. He was driving the furthest of everybody to come to practice. And then Steven's brother jumped in and we started playing with him. And then at a certain point they were just like, yeah, we can't really see the point of continuing this. We don't want to do it anymore. So our rhythm section was gone. And that ended it. Like, I didn't want to push it any further at that point. I already felt like it was, I already felt super burnt out on music. And so it's funny because you kind of said that I took a break from music to do my family. It's GNARBOOTS happened the entire time that I've been having kids, to a pretty substantial degree. But the whole thing with GNARBOOTS was it was a complete 180 from everything we did with DESA. I was so burnt out on music and so angry that I wanted to bum audiences out. I wanted venues to like ban us, which happened a few times. I wanted to create problems for people because I was so upset about it that I wanted to like get off on the anger and disillusionment of others. I wanted other bands to break up because of us. Like I wanted to bum out the other bands we were playing with so bad that they would break up. And then the funny thing is it completely backfired on me. The whole thing ended up becoming a super positive experience.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, the audience or the band that we were playing with would fall in love with us for being so insane.
Right.
And it taught me a lot of things about playing music. You don't have to have a practice space. You don't have to practice every single week. You don't have to. I mean, in this day and age, all you have to do is write and record music and then eventually play some shows to promote it. And
you don't even have to do that.
Yeah. So, I mean, all you have to really do is just say, I have a band. And you have a band. Poof. It's magic. So
I mean, we have a band.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I actually 100% agree with you on that. Like it's become so, I mean, it was always easy, to start playing music. You just had to do it. But in terms of like getting yourself into any kind of like an audience's view, there are way more avenues now than there ever were. I mean, because even only about like 10 years ago, it was, well, MySpace and Facebook have been around for over 10 years, but I guess like 15 years ago, prior to like the big social media networks, it was still like that tried and true. You had to have word of mouth. You had to get on the email and like hustle. You had to make a bunch of phone calls. You had to send a bunch of demo tapes, and just, it was that same thing over and over and over. And so much of it relied on timing and hustle, Mm-hmm. And timing and hustle still matter, but you can really just put out a song like every couple of days or whatever up on Bandcamp or Spotify, whatever frequency you want to do it. And there are people actively using Bandcamp and Spotify and any number one of these, streaming services to actively look for music. And it's been this huge benefit. And, there's obviously the downside of it not really having much of a return monetarily, particularly using like Spotify or something like that. But if you really do strike a chord with people on like that musical level, like you can really take off. Like I cited this as in another podcast that I did, Jason, who's just really taken off, and she's one of like a bunch of, I guess what they call like bedroom stars, like where they just basically recorded everything in their bedroom with either just their own computer and their own wits, or like a friend who'll help produce it, and then it just took off, and it's incredible what you can do now. And I would encourage anyone to try it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really.
But yeah, I mean, with GNARBOOTS, one of the things that I always really liked about watching you guys was that it really was kind of like this mixture of like performance art and chaos, and like you said, like kind of like antagonizing the audience, like trying to like make them uncomfortable, like a bit. And I mean, are there any other artists that you really think that are kind of doing something along the same line nowadays that you could speak to?
Not so much the way that GNARBOOTS is. I mean, there's definitely two acts that we align ourselves with a lot, which are GN.A.R.B.O.O.T.S and Quintel Decrypted.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say the three of our bands kind of all live in the same universe, but we all kind of enter it through different ways. GN.A.R.B.O.O.T, for those who don't know, is a duo who live in their van in the East Bay. They have been making music since, I believe, 2014 or 2015. They put out about over 30 records. They started as hardcore with kind of electronic elements, and they've since kind of turned into this, and they've gone through a whole bunch of different kind of moods and iterations, but now they're kind of like cyber grind, I think is what they would call themselves. Like it's electronic, but it's basically grindcore. And they really personify to me like taking your creativity to the farthest extreme and creating music that they want to hear in the world that doesn't exist. So they're my like North Star as far as like GNARBOOTS. And then Quintel Decrypted is another artist that we're really good friends with. It's a person named Sean who does singer-songwriters type stuff. And I think they had a band at one point, and they've played these songs for a really long time. They were a theater kid originally, and so they had singing chops from that. And they so slowly realized that they don't need a band. You can see right behind you, you've got a bunch of synthesizers. You can sequence everything now. You can bring your own PA to a show, and you can orchestrate everything yourself. Mm-hmm. You don't have to have a band anymore. And they've slowly created this whole world through video and projection and set pieces where they'll show up hours before a show happens, and they'll set up an elaborate world that you then inhabit during the show. And it's the opposite side of GNARBOOTS, where we're trying to create a world and a mood, but ours is much more chaotic and much more aggressive, whereas Quintel Decrypted is all about this kind of spooky, melancholy vibe.
Yeah. That's I mean, I've seen a little bit of the footage that you've like kind of pushed out there on social media, and it certainly looks really intriguing. I should probably dig into it a little bit more, but definitely know about GN.A.R.B.O.O.T. I've seen their van drive by quite a bit. Yeah. In the East Bay. And yeah, I mean, I've heard that you have actually been involved with some of their recordings, and also like they have also done some work with you in Omnigone, right?
So their van is basically a mobile recording studio. They live in there and they have all their gear in there. They have a drum set up in there. Mm-hmm. And when we recorded vocals for the Omnigone record, we did it in GN.A.R.B.O.O.T, which was great. it was such a low pressure environment to sit there, just myself and Jamie in a parking lot, and just, Jamie also understands recording screaming vocals. Jamie would put the cans on me and say, I'm going to blast the track. It's going to sound distorted in your headphones. You're not going to hear your voice because you don't need to hear your voice. You're just yelling.
Right.
So if you hear your voice, you're going to pull back. That was one of the coolest things to me to realize, because every time I've recorded vocals in the past, it's been in front of an entire band in a vocal booth with my own voice as loud as possible in my headphones, which is awful. Especially when you hear your own voice recorded back and you're like, that's what I sound like? Ugh. Yeah. So Jamie would just take it all the way out and then just hit playback after we were done and say, okay, here's what it sounds like. And then for a more recent recording session we did, we were stacking vocals to get, big chorus parts. And Jamie would just drill me in this van, just say, okay, hit it again, hit it again, hit it again. And just take the ones that were good. And by the end of it, I was just drenched in sweat. That's the other thing too, is usually when you're singing, you're standing so you can use your diaphragm. And in this van, you have to just sit down, and everything hurt after that.
Yeah.
But in a good way.
Yeah. No, recording, man, it's such an awesome process and incredibly frustrating at the same time. Like it can be so fun, and, depending on like the scenario, like whether or not you're recording at home or if you're recording like this really like 5-star, like plush studio with like all the bells and whistles, the like any given day can be either just soul crushingly heavy and horrible, or it can be like this awesome experience. And that sounds really just fun and lighthearted. And you can, I'd imagine that you could get a lot of really cool and interesting stuff out of that experience. So that's cool. I mean, I've heard a lot of GN.A.R.B.O.O.T stuff based on your recommendation, and it's really, really cool. So yeah, people should definitely
really out there. I mean, one of the things also coming up back in the day with recording, everything used to be one thing at a time. So it would be drums and then bass and then guitars, and you were, piecing it all together instead of doing it live, which is so much better. And how the only way I want to record now, I don't ever want to go back to doing it the old way. I mean, I'm down to go back and double a guitar, but I don't want to not be playing guitar at the same time that the drums are happening. The energy gets completely sucked out of the recording. And I feel like the bigger studios back in the day were really into isolating everything so that they had complete control over mixing, to the detriment of the band or the song.
Sure.
I remember being in the studio with Lucky Strike, not when I was in the band, but just when Liz and I were dating, and watching them basically torture Liz to get these like perfect drum takes, because they wanted everything to be to a click. And it was heartbreaking because it sucked the life out of the takes.
Yeah.
And it was super frustrating for her because she'd never practiced to a click. And it, I feel like if that band had just gone in the studio and recorded the way they played live, I feel like those records would have come out so much better.
I mean, there's a lot to be said about, any band, I mean, under any genre or any mood or even any level of, experience, being able to capture the essence of the band like you're talking about. Because, like I've done both, where I've had like the strip down, we're doing one element at a time. And I've also done we're just going to get into a room and play. And I mean, honestly, I agree. Like a lot of times the ones where you capture it live sound so much better and so much more fun and real and authentic. And, sometimes they sound like crap too, but I think part of it is too, you just got to be on the right day, and you got to have a good engineer who understands how to capture a full band at one time as well.
Right.
Because if you're in the room with like an inexperienced engineer and they don't know what they're doing, then that'll make a big difference too.
Well, and you have to hit it right too. Like if you're going to make mistakes while you're playing, then you do have to like isolate everything and do it piece by piece. But if you're okay with there being a certain level of mistake, or if you can play it right the first time and you don't have to go back and punch something in,
right,
it ends up not being a problem.
Yeah. Well, outside of the world of music, you're a graphic artist and illustrator. Like, what's some of the projects that you've been working on in that world?
It's been weird lately. I went into it pretty heavy for a while, and then I had a couple projects that left me kind of disillusioned about doing art, and so other things were music and working. I was teaching classes at the gym. All of that stuff was, and I was also giving guitar lessons. All of that stuff was creating steadier income and making me happier than a lot of times. The problem with being an illustrator for me is that people want to draw through you. You are the conduit for their creative idea. So rather than them saying, I'd like a picture of a skull, and then you draw a skull, and then they say, great, that's a skull, here's your check. They're like, no, I think that the skull should be like this, and it should have a little hat on its head, and it should be saying something, and it should be lime green, and then you make all these adjustments for your client. And at the end, maybe they go, perfect, that's great, or they're like, well, I guess that's kind of what I wanted, and then you get paid, and at the end of it, you end up feeling crappy. And that's been my feelings about illustration a couple of years ago, at least. And more recently, I've been trying to devote more energy to it. I have this space now in my home where I can create music and art, and I can have all the weird stuff that inspires me around me. And so I've been putting more time into illustration. And one of the things I've been trying to do when I take on work is to maybe not give the client so much leeway, where they feel like they have the power to just make an infinite number of choices. Where I do a loose drawing. I say, this is the concept. And then if they like the concept, then I complete the drawing. And then when it's done, it's done. Mm-hmm. However, though, I did do art for Kill Lincoln recently. They put out the Japanese version of their new record has a cover of a Skank and Pickle song. David Duke is running for president. Mm-hmm. So they wanted an image for the digital single. And so I was like, okay. And so I brainstormed on it a while. And I don't know if you've looked at a picture of David Duke. He's a really uninteresting looking human being. He looks
very
like
vanilla. Yeah.
He has no facial features. So I was trying to figure out what I was going to draw for this thing. And I originally did this thing where it was like one of those faces where when you turn it upside down, it's another face. And so it was one way it was David Duke's face, and the other way it was Trump's face. Mm-hmm. Wow. And it came out nice, but it was gross looking because both of them are really gross looking. And so I sent it to them, and they were like, hey, it's gross. Like, it's cool, but it's gross. And I was like, absolutely, let me take another swing at it. And so then we did a couple other sketches, and those ended up being too edgy and kind of just, they were like, I can just tell you, it was a picture of the White House, all kind of dark, with this looming Klansman over the top of it. And it was really a striking image. It was really disturbing looking. Mm-hmm. And they were like, yeah, but that could really that art could get taken out of context. Somebody could reappropriate it, and that would be bad. And I was like, absolutely, let's not do that. So then the next iteration of it, I did the Ghostbusters logo, but it was a Klansman. Mm-hmm. And that's already been done, though. So I was like, I wasn't super hot on that idea, but I just wanted to see what it would look like. And then finally I landed on, why don't I just draw someone as the Skanking Pickle guy? Yeah. And it turns out that on the last record that Kill Lincoln did, there was a little like kind of skull character with a blindfold on, holding like a bindle, like he's out hitchhiking. And so I just drew that guy as the Skanking Pickle guy. Mm-hmm. And it came out perfect. It was exactly what I wanted. So sometimes it works, but I feel like your client has to know how to explain what they want. and also most of those didn't get past the rough draft version. So it's only when it gets into like the final version of something and then somebody wants to tweak stuff, that's when it starts to get soul crushing. And I have a bunch of friends who do illustration full-time, and that's their full-time gig. And I feel like it ends up being really soul crushing for them. And I don't want to do that. Like, yeah. I want it to always be fun.
Yeah, I know a lot of people that are both illustrators and graphic designers, and it's their main source of income. And I hear a lot of that same kind of, talk about it, where they're just like, man, like I started doing this because I love it, and when it became a job, it started to lose. I mean, it goes with a lot of different types of professions like this, where anything like creative endeavors, where if it becomes too much work and you're having to pull people to having to explain it to you, and eventually your creativity just kind of eventually evaporates from the whole spectrum of what your job is,
Mm-hmm.
And then where do you find the time to do it outside of the job? Because now you're frustrated and tired and you're just like, I don't even want to be creative. But, one of the things I wanted to ask you in that regard is, because you have so many things kind of up in the air between music and being a father, and, you're also, somebody who teaches fitness classes, how do you keep yourself really motivated? I mean, is there a special sauce that you use for that?
No, I mean, it's just trying to balance stuff, just keep the plate spinning. I mean, it hasn't, with the pandemic hitting, I feel like right before that, I was getting to a really good place. I was teaching, I think 3 or 4 days a week at the gym. I was teaching classes. And then I had also just landed a marketing position at the gym. And the gym is a gym in Alameda called Bladium. I love being there. I love the people who I work with there. It's completely changed my life. And so I was really happy to get into this desk position there, because it's marketing. Yeah. And it's, trying to sell something, but it's selling something that I believe in. And, so, I mean, for years before that, I was the stay-at-home parent. Like I was trying to kind of eke these things out while my kids were taking naps or, doing whatever. And now my kids are in elementary school. So it was finally getting to the point where I was going out into the world, and I was rejoining the workforce, and I was feeling motivated to like play bigger shows and like put more energy into a band. And then COVID-19 hit, and now I'm back home with the kids. Yep. This year we'll be starting remote learning. I'll be the learning coach for my children. And so I will be spending the next year as a homeschool teacher, basically. I'll have some support through the program that the school district has set up, but it's really kind of, it took my brain a while to kind of catch up to that. Like it was such a big thing for me to go and spend time at the gym every day and feel good that way. And now, like for the last couple of weeks, I haven't felt like working out, like, because I have to do it in my backyard and it interrupts my day with my kids or my wife. I can't set aside the time for it. Eventually I'll figure out a program and I'll do something in my backyard. I was trying to figure out some things. I was running some workout classes online through the Bad Time Records Instagram. And it was diminishing returns. It didn't feel good to me. So I just need to find a new avenue for it. And it'll, I just have to keep telling myself that this is just a temporary situation, that we'll eventually go back to a semi-normal world again, where we can gather together. But for now, it's more important to focus on being home and appreciating what I have here. I was talking to my wife at one point, saying how the kids were getting so big so fast, and that it was, even though I've been around it, I've never spent more than 3 days away from my kids in a row. And so I've been there for every moment, and I've savored every moment of them growing up, but it still doesn't feel like enough. And so it's nice to have this time again this summer where we can really, really spend time with them and enjoy them being little people still. because, you know, before I know it, they're going to be angry teenagers.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't have kids, you know, so I don't really understand, but I've worked with a lot of kids, and, you know, that's such a huge job in and of itself, you know, so having any additional freedom and time to do anything on the creative level, I'm sure you just have to savor that and like really make the most out of it. And, you know, one of the things that I know that you speak to quite often, in like your social media posts and even in, you know, your music, especially with like Omnigone, you know, is really seizing the moment, living as much life as you possibly can now while you have it. And you know, it's easy to say that. It's another thing to do it. But I think it's important that persons like yourself, you know, really keep that message going out, because the more you hear it, the more you start to believe it, you know, because sometimes it's hard for people to actually do that on their own, you know.
Yeah.
So if a person on the outside who they respect, like, you know, I personally get a lot of motivation seeing you be motivated, you know. I mean, you know, I've known you for like what, 20 years now, something like that, you know, close to that. And, you know, having the ability to see a peer of mine like kind of follow in similar directions, like, you know, I like to think that I lead a pretty healthy lifestyle. Like, I like to work out, and I feel the same way. Like, motivation for working out has been kind of hard, you know, but we just we have to find that resolve, and we have to find that energy to do it. Or else you're going to just feel bad, you know.
The
like
crazy thing with the exercising also is, it gives me a lot of energy. Like when I'm working out all the time, I'm accredited a lot of the time for giving me the energy to want to do a ska-punk band right now from all the working out. But I feel like also being cooped up in the house all day, if I maintain that level of energy, it makes me like not fun to be around, because then I'm like bouncing off the walls and I'm like, come on, let's go. Yeah. And it's not conducive to like a relaxing environment. Like I'm trying to do too much then. So I've even had to like see it as like, I need to pull back a little bit from what I was doing, like the super aggressive, really hyperkinetic exercise that I like to do. You know, now it's like, after this, I'll go do yoga with my wife instead. So bringing it down a little bit, but still trying to like honor my body and like take care of myself, so that as I age, that things still feel okay. I mean, I never thought that at this age I would feel good about like jumping up and down on a stage and running around with a microphone. And so it makes me think like, how much further out can I go? Because I thought like 35 would be the end of it. And now I'm well past that.
Sure.
I never thought of my life past 27, because that's when, you know, when you buy into the whole idea of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, you get told, oh, you have a life expectancy of 27. Sure. And even if you live this like healthy lifestyle that I do, you are ingrained to think that, which is insane. But so now all this time past that point feels like a gift, and it feels like, wow, I'm still here. I still feel alive and vibrant. I still feel like my brain like is willing to accept new information, and I'm not just some old codger who, you know, is stuck in my ways. Like, I'm totally willing to learn new things and hear new music.
Yeah, that's like a weird thing that kind of gets told over and over, where it's like, past a certain point, you kind of stop, you know, caring about what's new and whatnot. And like, I don't buy into that at all. Like, I never have. And like, I'm constantly trying to find new and interesting music. And, you know, I don't pay attention to all of it, and I don't receive all of it either. But, you know, and I'll admit, like, I'm kind of one of those 90s kids that like re-listens to like Smashing Pumpkins over and over and over, but that's what speaks to me. But like Hum just put out a new record, and it's fucking incredible, you know, like it's probably one of the best records of the year in my opinion. But there's still a million other records out there that I want to hear to see if that surpasses it. And, you know, I'm constantly trying to keep that inspiration level up. And, you know, as far as, you know, that goes, you know, you've already touched on a few artists that you kind of recently have admired, like Cat Bite and Vantana Row. And, but are there any other bands or artists out there that people may not be aware of that you'd like to take a moment and just like give them a quick kind of shout out, to say, hey, like you should check this band out and like this is why.
Sure. Let's see. Okay, well, I'm going to go through lightning round, go through a couple that we already went through. This is the most recent Quintel Decrypted record. It's this is an EP called Away Message.
Okay.
Sean's currently working on a new record that I don't know the title of. I think it might be called Blue Flowers, or that might just be a track on it. I've heard the whole thing. It's incredible. It's the best thing they've ever done. So be on the lookout for that. Here's kind of the alpha and omega of these. This is the first Vantana Row record, Dim's R.I.P., and then this is Forever, which is spelled for Ouriver. Both insanely good records. You can find those for free on Bandcamp. Kill Lincoln's new record, really, really, really amazing ska-punk record. If there is a fourth wave, this is it right here. Of course, Catbite, amazing band, tons of praise right now. This record, phenomenal, front to back. I always bust their chops, though, that they put out Amphetamine Delight as the single. It's not the best song on the record by far. It's a fine song, but there's the rest of the songs all surpass it. The Stuck Lucky Still Alive split 12-inch. This, if Kill Lincoln is not the fourth wave, then this is the fourth wave. This is insane. And the funny thing is, I think I met most of the guys from these bands when we did the Asian Man Records 20th anniversary with Link 80. I'm pretty sure most of these guys were there at the time, did not realize how awesome their bands are.
Nice.
Incredible. Also, look at this vinyl really quick.
Oh,
Orange
yeah, that's
purple.
That's
beautiful. One more. Gray Matter, their new album, Climbing Out. Amazing, weird Blue Meanie style, but with more of a hardcore flavor, ska-punk type stuff. Really, really incredible young band. Really excited to see them do more stuff. They're the best. Bad Time Records is where it's at.
Yeah, I'm definitely a believer in Bad Time Records. Mike and everyone that's involved has been doing a great job, and huge shout out to Ska-Tune Network as well. For really trying to like bust. So much word out for all of the upcoming ska bands. And elevating that scene in a huge, huge way.
Yeah, and Jeremy just turned 25.
Mm-hmm.
Happy birthday, Jer. And Jer has a new project just called G.N.A.R.B.O.O.T.S, which we'll be putting out a record at some point in the future. And it's just instead of it being Ska-Tune Network covers, it's original material. And it's bangers, like great songs. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I absolutely love Jer.
Yeah. Well, yeah, man. Well, hey, it's been so awesome to have a chat with you and to kind of talk about what's been going on. Huge props for what's been going on with Omnigone. I love your record. I own it. I'm getting a copy of the Catbite split here in the mail, hopefully soon. I know that you...
Those all went out in the mail today, so by the time this comes out, they should all be in people's possession.
Yeah, and I've heard it already, and it's wonderful. I love that you guys covered Nothing New.
Yeah,
again.
Yeah, back to Blast Bandits. I heard a little something about Blast Bandits maybe soon. So
there's some rumblings. Yeah, we're gonna kind of let that. We're gonna see what happens with that, but we'll keep you informed. But
it's exciting stuff. Blast Bandits, I think, are the most underappreciated ska punk band from that era.
Hey man, like all it took was listening to that original demo for me to get hooked, and I was fortunate enough to play in that band for a few years. So, I consider myself very lucky to have had that experience. Yeah, Barry and Malone and Ryan and Buddy and Jake, Charlie, everyone involved, David, great dudes, and we'll see what happens. I'm gonna keep it quiet for now, but we're gonna see what we can do with that.
Yeah, that's something that's on my radar, and I'm super excited about it. Yeah. I can't say enough good things about Blast Bandits, especially that that initial demo tape, I actually I have a dub of it, and I have some stuff that I actually have to take and get transferred soon. Other old DAT tapes, and that I think I'm actually going to take that tape too, just to have it transferred.
Nice.
It's so good, and I want people to be able to hear it.
Yeah, it's certainly much better than that CD.
I mean, I think the CD, it's one of those things that we were talking about, where I feel like the way that it was recorded ended up being to the detriment of the music.
Yeah, I mean, we were in a weird position where we felt like we needed to do something like kind of fast, and we were just a little impatient, and we totally, in hindsight, understand exactly what went wrong. We just needed to slow down, take a little bit more time, find the right person to record with, and then it would have turned out so much better. But thankfully, we have those old tapes, which sound much better and are much more representative of like what that band was really all about and like how good that band was. So pretty awesome. But yeah, man. So we're going to go ahead and end the show with one of your guys' songs. And I really appreciate you being on once again. And, I wish you guys nothing but, luck in the future, and, stay safe and just keep in touch, man.
For sure, man. Good to talk to you.
Yep. Talk soon.
Bye.